a feature of leadership is recognizing your total dependence on the people around you and creating an environment where they can flourish. And for me, we just published a 6th edition of the Canadian Securities Regulation book I first wrote a long time ago with student help. But it's my students that help me continue to write those things.
Hello, and welcome to Transcending Boundaries. I'm Reeta Roy. Today, we welcome a man whose life has quietly shaped the fabric of a nation, from the ice rinks of Sault Ste. Marie to the halls of Harvard and Cambridge, from universities to Rideau Hall. He has journeyed not in pursuit of power, but in the service of principle. He began as an athlete, a scholar, a teacher, a lover of learning. And yet his reach would extend far beyond the academy into law, public service, diplomacy, and civic life. As Canada's 28th Governor General, he called us to be a smart and caring nation, a country that learns, that gives, and that lifts one another up. He has advised prime ministers, taught generations of students, and written pages that influence how we govern and how we live. And through it all, what endures most is his humility, his decency, and his unshakable belief that leadership is not about status, but stewardship. He reminds us that building a better world is not a grand gesture. It is a daily act. It is my honor to welcome to Transcending Boundaries a constitutional scholar, a statesman, a servant of Canada, the Right Honourable David Johnston. David, thank you for being on this program. I'm so honoured to have you as my guest. It is really a joy because you've had an extraordinary life.
Reeta, it's a delight for me to be with you in this program, and you're far too kind.
You are amazing. You know that. This is all about discovering what made you you. And I thought a great place to start is where you grew up in Coppercliff and then in Sault Ste. Marie. Would you tell us a little bit about growing up in a small town and about your parents as well, Dorothy and Lloyd?
I had a wonderful growing up, Reeta, growing up in 2 northern Ontario resource towns, Coppercliff, Sudbury, and then Sault Ste. Marie. And there was a great sense of community belonging. People looked after one another, as one did in operating in challenging circumstances. The steel company in Sault Ste. Marie, for example, was very dependent upon markets, so it would be up and down, etc. But, I think that upbringing gave me a great sense of kind of being humble before your community and recognizing how that was so important. And when I was Governor General, we were up in above the North Arctic Circle, and it was Repulse Bay. And as we landed, we realized that there was a Terry Fox run occurring that day. And that's recognizing the annual ceremony of Terry Fox coming across Canada, and his cancer returned, and he was not able to finish his race. But the Terry Fox runs have continued on, and my wife and I and our children, now our grandchildren, have run in almost all of those. So we had our exercise kit with us, so we got out and decided we'd participate in this run, 5 kilometers. And as I was at the starting line to start it off, the point of this story is, who am I? And the little guy, about 9 years old, says, who are you anyway? And I said, I'm the Governor General of Canada. He says, what's your name anyway? I said, my name is David. He said, well, David, how old are you anyway? I said, I'm 71 years old. He says, I didn't think anybody could get that old. So Sharon and I finished the race, and I found the little guy, and I put my arm around his shoulder, and I said, not dead yet. Anyway.
Not dead.
And I tell that story just to remember who you are and how much you are supported and influenced by people around you. I'd like to think that if I'd born in any other country, I'd probably be digging potatoes or cutting pulpwood. But I grew up in a community that was very supportive.
Amazing, amazing. And what were your parents like, Dorothy and
Uh,
Lloyd?
it was a challenge. My father ran a small business which went bankrupt in one of the downturns in Sault Ste. Marie. So he was unemployed for much of the time I was in high school, grade school. So I learned at about age 7 or 8 that I had a paper route, and if you wanted a bicycle or a new pair of blue jeans, well, you just earned what was necessary, and those were very good lessons. My mother she had a degree from the University of Michigan, American, and she stressed education to myself, my brother, and my sister. And all three of us ended up as being teachers, so there was that kind of influence. But the community was remarkably influential as I look upon what I'd done after leaving Sault Ste. Marie for college, etc. Those lessons have meant so much to me. For example, I love sports, and I was 13 at the time, and the scout from the Toronto Maple Leafs was going to be at a game in the one indoor arena we played on a Friday night, and I get a call from a man by the name of Dan Taylor, whom I didn't know well, but he ran a sporting goods store just across from the arena. He said, "Young man," he said, "come to see me an hour before your game tomorrow night. I've got something for you." I went to his store and he had a new pair of skates. I had never had a new piece of hockey equipment at all. And I had these new skates, and I was like Hans Brinker with them. I scored 3 goals that night. It was
Wow.
all to do with the skates. And this was a guy that just was helping a kid along. And that was Sault Ste. Marie for me.
That's amazing. That's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Now, you loved hockey, you love sport,
Yep.
and you went on to do a lot of sport, especially when you went on to Harvard. Tell us about that journey, just the journey from your hometown to the United States, school, settling in with a whole different crowd of young people.
Harvard was marvelous for me. It gave me a really robust education, and I've served in many government roles at Harvard since then. In fact, I was there just several weeks ago for convocation of alumni. But it was an interesting journey, really, because I was, I guess, scouted about grade 10 by an alumnus in Minneapolis who was looking for good scholar athletes. And I emphasized the scholar part, which was key. And so by my last year of high school, that's the place I wanted to go. And I went to see my principal, who was a very good man, a science teacher, very fine man. Said, "I need a reference for this." He said, "Well, I'm not prepared to write it for you, son, because I don't want you going to a third-rate American university." I said, "Well, there may be a few of those here, but I think you know that this isn't one of them." He said, "But if you go there, you'll stay in the United States, you'll be lost to Canada." I said, "I don't think so, sir. This is my home. I'll come back." Well, he says, "I'm not prepared to write the letter." So I went down the hall to the history teacher, who was also the football coach. He says, "I will write the letter with you." He said, "You've been a big frog in a really small pond, and you got to get your head knocked off by people who are meaner, tougher, stronger, faster, and smarter than you are."
Oh, my goodness.
And I went, and for the first few months, they were all of that. And you learn a lot of lessons about responding to challenges and being resilient and knowing who you are. And I had just a wonderful 4 years at Harvard.
That's incredible. Now, you also were part of a fraternity.
Sorry?
You were part of a fraternity when you were there for a short period of time, maybe, or you considered joining one. But there's a story about standing up for values.
Yeah.
And would you tell us the story?
It was an interesting, it was 1959, Rita, and the civil rights movement really became 1963, 64 with President Kennedy and others. And there were very few African American people in my class of 2000. I think there were perhaps 15. And there was a student, this was my first year, from Nigeria, was a wonderful soccer player, and he was being considered for this fraternity, or final club, as we call them at Harvard. I had joined a few weeks earlier. That they provided a scholarship, which was very thoughtful. And then I learned that there had to be a vote on this, but the club decided that one would have to decide whether we would have the first black person, African American, join the club, and they had to take advice from the alumni. And the advice from the alumni was, no, this is not a club that has non-white people. And I was shocked by that. And so I resigned. And it was a very challenging circumstance because my circle of friends and my teammates in the football and hockey teams were pretty upset with me for doing this decision. I said, please, I'm not making a protest. I'm not suggesting any changes in how you conduct your lives, but I simply couldn't be comfortable in that kind of situation. I grew up in a different country, and that's just who I am, what was. So there was a price to be paid. I was sent to Coventry for a period of time, but actually during that period of time, we began to see the civil rights movement in the United States. But it was one of those things where it was not a question of a difficult decision. There was no decision to make. This just would have been the wrong thing to do. And to this day, the test for me, Reeta, is to be able to look my children in the eye. We have 5 daughters, and to be able to explain what I've done. And in difficult decisions, often the difficulty becomes much less when you say, what's the right thing to do? Not doing the thing right, but what is the right thing to do?
It's a powerful, powerful lesson.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible source of courage as well, to think about that in such pure, simple terms in the face of something which is challenging.
And it wasn't a matter of courage. It was a matter of who you are and what you do. And you have to realize that pleasing the crowd does not make a lot of sense in most circumstances. Do what is the right thing.
Yeah. David, when you think about that, and you think about the career that you've had, about doing the right thing, and how do we find what is the right thing?
When I was installed as Governor General, Reeta, the title of my installation address was "A Smart and Caring Country, a Call to Service." And I said, if you remember only 3 words of what I say today, they are cherish our teachers. Cherish our teachers, because apart from our family, they are the ones who have the most influence on us. And I said, if we had 3 or 4 hours more in the Senate chamber, I'd tell you dozens and dozens of stories of teachers, coaches, mentors who've made a difference in my life. And I've been so lucky in my journey in life, to cross paths with different people. And you kind of look and say, that person is quite special, and what's special? And that's where the values come. A sense of integrity, sense of empathy, compassion in action, trusting person, people that are self-disciplined and see the public good as important, and believe in doing the job as well as you possibly can. And I just owe so much to countless people who have influenced me, including some professors that have just made a profound influence on me. I was at Harvard, and then had to make a choice between staying and playing professional hockey or going off to Cambridge, where I had a scholarship to study law. And thinking of my high school principal, I've now gone from the United States to the United Kingdom, moving even further away. And then I came back to Canada to finish a Canadian law degree, and was all set to practice law. And the dean of the law school at Queen's University, where I was, asked me if I'd join the faculty. I said, well, sir, I'd be honored, but I can't. I've signed my articles of indenture with a law firm. And he said, how large is the firm? Oh, I suspect 100 lawyers or so. He said, I think, my boy, they could get along without you for a year or 2. So I went to my man who was to my senior, who had just done a 6th edition of a book called Canadian Securities Regulation, which I first wrote when I was a young law professor. But that particular man that to whom I was indentured, when I went to say I've been offered this position, he said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I'd like to be a university professor for a year or 2. He says, well, when you've got the courage to face the real world, come, we'll teach you how to practice law.
Oh my
But
goodness.
then they brought me there for the summer, and I began working on a Securities Regulation Act that he was helping to draft, and that became lifetime. I tell that story because here is a kind of a fork in the road, and I think what caused me to stay at the university is I believe so much in the power of education. And so that's been my career as a professor of law, hoping to improve the system of justice in our country. But the man I mentioned, Purdy Crawford, was an expert in securities law, and I began to learn from him. And then, as a young law professor at the University of Toronto, I became a part-time commissioner of the Ontario Securities Commission. Wrote a book on that area of law, securities regulation, and just about 2 months ago, we published the 6th edition of that book. So I've been able to keep it going over the years, 60 some years, 55, with the help of former students. And the first book was 400 pages. This one was 1,200. Six editions.
Is it getting better, or is it getting
longer?
I'm sure it's read longer.
The law is getting more complicated. That's the answer.
Absolutely. You know, David, you've had, I guess, 44 plus years, give or take, from being a law professor to dean of a law school to being principal, vice chancellor of universities. I mean, you think about that span of time and how education, especially higher education, has also evolved to be much more inclusive of all students, all walks of life.
Yes.
What does it take to be, one, a teacher, and a teacher who sees through decades, and at the same time be a learner?
Yeah, both. Both. An eager learner with constant curiosity. And I think the great teachers tend to be pretty unselfish people. They really enjoy seeing their students thrive and imparting to them whatever is necessary to help them thrive and maintain that constant sense of curiosity. When I think about Canada, when your first question, I was going to say, Reeta, if I born in most other countries, I'd be digging potatoes or cutting pulpwood. But I was lucky to be born in this country, Canada, where we're not perfect, but what is very special about this country is that we believe in equality of opportunity. That is, opportunity for each individual to be able to develop themselves and to live a satisfying life where one can advance into whatever one is particularly interested in doing. And the key to that is a good public education system. And we do have that, from early childhood education right on through to postdoctoral activities, and then on in things. And it's something we have to work at every day, every way. In fact, one of the involvements we've had with MasterCard Foundation, which you so brilliantly lead, Reeta, and I say that with knowledge because I was on the board when we engaged you, the best judgment we ever made, I think. But MasterCard has partnered with the Reeta Hall Foundation, which I set up when I was at Governor General, to provide educational opportunities for 10,000 Indigenous young people as teachers, working with the Indigenous groups across the country, working with the local communities, with the faculties of education and so on, to give young Indigenous people interest in teaching a very great preparation to be teachers, but doing so with a very great respect for their culture and their customs and so on. And that program is absolutely flourishing. And for Canada, that's so important because we've had a very unfortunate history in terms of educational opportunities for our Indigenous people. And this approach is just so sensible because nothing about us without us. Indigenous people will be helping to shape the particular programs that take place at the faculties of education and so on. And it's absolutely flourishing. We've been involved at it for about 3 years now, and it's just going from strength to strength.
No, we're so grateful for the
But so important for the country. You know, if we believed in equality of opportunity, so what are we doing to be sure that it is really
truly equal
equality of opportunity?
Truly equal. No, it is remarkable. David, when you think about stewarding the whole education system, and certainly in your multiple chapters of your career, and I think about the education system in many parts of the world, which faces enormous challenges, including academic freedom, the ability for students, faculty to explore ideas, even though they may seem crazy and completely counterintuitive to the times we're in. that ability, that's holding that space
Yeah.
to explore it in a respectful manner, to have productive dialogue, to debate ideas, it just seems under assault. And if you were to give us advice of how we hold that space, what would you say?
Well, I think we have to stay firm to the principles of what an education is. Really going back to Aristotle and Plato, those ancient people who really spoke about constant learning and curiosity and so on, and the freedom to learn. Harvard's motto is Veritas, truth. And it's very interesting. It's an institution, like most universities, that are about non-truth. That is, taking the existing conventions and truths and looking at them from a critical point of view. The laws of physics, we're discovering something new every day. So that notion of veritas, seeking truth and being very open in the different patterns that we have to truth and very respectful of different opinions.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of elements that we want to ensure. And I think we begin by trying to understand our history and how we've evolved and how important learning is. And we're going through a digital revolution now, which is even more important than the information revolution, which was the printing press and books that really transformed Western Europe from the 15th century through to the 18th century. But it took 3 centuries for the printing press to reach a majority of the people of Western Europe. 3 years. The internet, which is digital communication, took less than a decade to reach the majority of the population of the world. For me, that is a great opportunity for learning because it means that content, digital content, teaching, can go to any corner of the world at a very low cost. That was more difficult in the days of publishing books, etc. Now, the challenge with that is that we've developed a new form of communication, which is quite revolutionary in some ways, in a space of 2 decades or so. And we're only now beginning to develop the rules of the road, such as privacy, such as avoiding much misinformation, which we see so much when one can just press a button and send anything anywhere, of organizations controlling so much content, etc. Those are all issues that we have to deal with. But we're in the kind of second or third inning of a 9-inning baseball game.
Oh my gosh, you're going to about lose me with these sports analogies. But that's true. It is much more
Developing
complex.
the rules of the road.
Yeah, it is much more
But
complex.
using this wonderful new technological advance of the digital revolution and now artificial intelligence, which has some great positives but some real concerns. How do we have the rules of the road? And use those technologies to pursue veritas, truth, in many ways, and educational opportunity for every corner of the world.
That's right. Pursue the truth and at the same time pursue the aspiration of improving lives.
Yes.
Now, David, there was a part of time when you were asked to moderate political debates in Canada. And you played an incredible role to enable, once again, hold the space, enable people to speak about their views, to share who they are.
Yeah.
What are the ingredients of enabling debate, to enabling multiple views to come forward?
That was an interesting period in my life, Reeta. It was, I guess, goes back to 1976, 77. I was the dean of the law school at Western, and I think it was the first televised debates we had of Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Broadbent, and Mr. Clark at the time. I was sitting in my office. It was actually on a Sunday night, and a call came from one of the television networks saying, "Would you moderate the leaders' debate, which is in 2 weeks' time?" And I said, "Well, that's an interesting idea. Why me?" He said, "Well, to be very frank with you, sir, the 2 or 3 television networks and the others couldn't agree on a moderator. They each wanted their own person. So we want someone who's completely removed from television, etc." And I said, "Well, I guess I'm that. But why me?" He said, "Well, one has to steer the debate and be prepared to keep a sort of regional hand on things." So I did it. I did two of them in a row, and uh, I was glad to do them because they were still relatively new. The Americans with John Kennedy and Richard Nixon had had their debates, and they were just coming into Canada. But for me, it's very important to have our leaders facing one another unscripted and presenting themselves and debating in the best sense of the word. Um, and the job of the moderator is to be simply a overseer to ensure that those two or three or four individuals can present themselves, can criticize one another responsibly with a degree of decorum. And it's a successful debate for the moderator if after it's over, no one knew who the moderator was. And then fast forward several years ago, I was asked if I would chair the Leaders Debates Commission because in 2015, I guess we had one of the parties, the then governing party, not wanting to participate in the debate, and arguments between the parties and arguments between the different networks. So we did that. I did that for several years. We had a couple of debates, and there were some good things and some bad things. The role of the moderator is quite critical, and for me, it's important that the moderator is just that, a moderator, not a player on the field, and should not be doing the interrogation. The interrogation should be back and forth between and amongst the candidates themselves. So that's the I think role of moderator. The debates themselves are very important because we should be presenting to our citizens, the democracy, an opportunity to see those individuals performing in somewhat challenging circumstances where they can't be prepared for every question. And you sometimes then get a glimpse of what their values are and what their basic approach is to more challenging situations.
Now, you talked about a phone call that came on a Sunday night. What was the phone call like when you approached to become Canada's 28th Governor General?
Well,
Maybe it wasn't a phone call.
It was a phone call.
It was a phone call.
There's, like so many things in life, there's stories, Reeta. So there was a appointments director for the prime minister saying, would you consider being governor general? And I said, well, that's very interesting. I've never thought of that, of course. And I rather like what I'm doing. I was a university president at one university, McGill, for 15 years, and now I'm just approaching 10 years at Waterloo, and I love what I do. And I've still got lots of energy. Look, I know how these things go. You're putting together a long list of people, but if you get down to a short list and by some fluke my name is on it, then give me a ring and I'll have to take it seriously. He said, can I call you back, sir? I said, sure. 20 minutes later, he calls back. He says, sir, it's a very short list, very, very short list. I said, well, all right, I better consider this. So I said, look, give me a week. My wife and I will have a good chat about this. And usually there are two or three close friends whose advice I take on important matters. I'd want to discuss this with. Oh, sorry, he said, you can't do that. I said, I can't do that. No, sir. He says, this is totally secret. I said, well, if you're telling me I can't speak to my wife, and I said I'd be interested, and then you offered me a job and I took it, my wife would have the luggage out on the veranda steps for me, say, go ahead, dear, you're on your own. So he said, again, can I call you back, sir? Yes. He called back. He says, sir, discuss your wife, please. And this is Tuesday. Could you come up and have dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Harper on a Thursday or Friday night? I said, well, I'll discuss my wife. So I called him back. Sharon and I had a good chat. She wasn't too keen on doing it, but God bless her. She's followed me other things than she did in this one, and was just terrific. It's a two-person job to do that job well, and she was just superb.
She was superb.
Just gracious and terrific. So up we went to meet Mr. and Mrs. Harper. I knew him. She and Lorraine, Mrs. Harper, struck great friendship right then and there. And the prime minister said, I think David's on side, Sharon, but it's you that we have to persuade. And at the end of the evening, she said, well, if David wants to do this, we'll do it. So that was that.
What a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Wonderful story. I still remember your speech at the inauguration, and you were installed as Governor General. And there was a moment, just a moment. What did you say that Sharon got up and she just tapped you? That must be something about your partnership. And it has been an incredible
I
partnership.
think you should probably telling me, put a smile on your face, dear.
And you met Sharon when you guys were just kids.
We were kids. She was
Kids.
13.
13.
Well, I was her first date in high school.
Aha.
I was a couple grades ahead. And that was that, 13. And then I went off to Harvard after that. She went to the University of Toronto. And we had a kind of distance romance. But then when I graduated, I was heading off to Cambridge, and we actually became engaged at Christmas of that year. And then she finished her university work, and the next year we spent our first year of marriage in Cambridge, England, which is wonderful.
Fantastic. How wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You've been through so many adventures. 5 daughters.
5 daughters. I say, Rita, not in jest, but all the important things in life I've learned from my children. And now I'm learning it from 14 grandchildren. And in fact, we did 5 different books when I was Governor General, and the book on empathy was to my children and grandchildren, from whom I learned so much. And the trust book earlier, again, focusing on what you learn from the young, we dedicated that to children who offer their trust implicitly in the full expectation of fairness. And that's what all they ask for is fairness, and that's what parenting is all about. And that concept of fairness, which we write about in the book on empathy and trust, the other one, is very much part of the fabric of this country. Another story, when Sir John Macdonald and Sir George Etchen Cartier took the proposed British North America Act to form Canada as a federation in 1866, 1867 it was completed. The theme of their draft was peace, fairness, and good government. When it got in the hands of the British draftsmen, they were concerned about the cost of stationing British military soldiers on soil which is now Canadian, but this was British North America, right, spreading out. And this was very costly. And also, the United States Civil War had just finished at that time, and the Union Army was there and strong and well prepared. And there was a real threat of it coming north to conquer Canada, take over Canada. So they changed the word fairness and put in order, peace, order, and good government. But we still, I think, understand one meaning of order is fairness. You're going to have a rule of law, but that rule of law must be based on justice, and justice is fairness. Always that value of fairness. And that's been a very common and important theme in Canada. And that Constitution has a focus on the collective good, peace, order, and good government, collective good. Whereas other constitutions, and our friends in the American states, United States, whose constitution was born out of rebellion, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are Lockean and Montesquieu concepts. Ours came, I guess, from the Westminster system. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness often being the pursuit of private property. Those are much more individualistic. So it's not worse or better than ours, it's just different. But that consciousness of the public good and fairness has been a very important value in the country.
That's extremely insightful, because it really speaks now to the national character.
Indeed.
About caring.
Indeed.
I know we always get teased that with Canadians we are so nice, but really deep down, it is about that quality of fairness.
Yeah.
It is about respect.
Yes.
Yeah. It is about recognizing others and seeing them in relation to the place that we share. So that's a powerful
It's so
insight.
powerful and so important. But, the other interesting feature of that in my kind of understanding of human psychology, that brings great joy to a person.
Mm.
To be able to conduct oneself that way and to be able to treat others in that way with that kind of respect and reaching out a hand. In the case, the empathy book, we speak about empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy, I feel full sorry for your plight. Isn't that too bad? Empathy is I understand your situation. I'm going to take your hand and help you along. And out of those kind of actions, there comes a sense of inner joy of helping someone else. And that, to me, is a pretty fundamental value.
That is a fundamental value. I think about this great country which has opened its doors. We are a country of many peoples.
Yes.
And so the sense of fairness, of pluralism, of care for one another is very, very strong. And I was just so happy when you made caring such a central tenet of your governor generalship. And you must have traveled the country and seen so many examples of how people live together with each other and help each other.
And making that work is the challenge. One of the great privileges of being Governor General is you entertain wonderful people from around the world that would stay. They typically stay with us at Reeta Hall for a weekend or a day. Angela Merkel was with us for a weekend at one occasion, and we had a panel of 4 or 5 of her ministers and then 3 or 4 of our senior external affairs people, and we were speaking about innovation and productivity and so on. And I was questioning her about whether the European Union, with 60, 70 years of peace in Europe, but how does it stay together and move on and include others? And she was cross-examining me about how on earth can this heterogeneous Canada with so many different cultures and so on work? It's got to be all chaotic. And rather than giving her a long lecture on that, I went down to my office where I kept about 10 copies of a book called Why Nations Fail by Darren Asimoglu of MIT and James Robinson then of Harvard, product of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research on Stable Societies. But their thesis is a very simple one, Rita. It is those societies, those countries that are inclusive in their economics and politics are on an upward spiral, inclusive. Those that are extractive in their economics and politics are in a downward spiral. And she took the word extractive. Her English is very good, but for about 5 minutes she was speaking in German to her colleagues, and they came up with 17 different definitions of extractive.
Wow.
Extractive is harsher than exclusive, etc. But that was the notion of inclusivity, and not just inclusivity that, you're all included, but actually involving people in the functioning of their society. And coming to your point about Sharon and I traveling across the country, that was one of the extraordinary experiences of being Governor General, that we would go to so many different cities and towns. And before going, I'd get a prep on the nature of that particular city. And I asked to find what was the level of volunteerism in that city. Was it higher than the national average or lower? And I would predict that if it was higher, that was a healthy community. If it was lower, it wasn't. And by and large, that was borne out when we went. And what we did for those visits is we revived a Caring Canadian Award that Romeo LeBlanc, about 30 years ago, had started as a Governor General Award. He grew up in an Acadian village in the Maritimes, very modest, did a high school, did a 1-year teacher's college degree, taught in his community, then a reporter, then a politician, minister, then Governor General. And he never forgot about how important the volunteer sphere was in the communities. And so we established, it actually fell afoul after he stepped down of budget cuts. And we established the Reeta Hall Foundation 2 years into my time as Governor General, that we could raise some money to carry on things that were important. And we raised $3 million to bulletproof that Caring Canadian Award so it would never disappear.
Yeah.
And then we made it a Governor General's Award in discussion with Queen Elizabeth on one occasion. we proposed that it become a sovereign's medal in volunteerism, not a governor general's honor, but a sovereign's medal. In fact, our first proposition would become Queen Elizabeth Medal on volunteerism, and she said, "I'm honored, and volunteerism means an enormous amount to me and throughout the Commonwealth. But I suggest you call it the Sovereign's Medal, so it will go on forever and ever and ever."
Wow, what a very modest.
And we would then do those ceremonies across the country, and I'd be touched almost to the point of tears, because you'd have someone who'd been running the local food bank for 30 years. And they'd come up and say, "I'm so honored to be recognized this way, but what about the hundreds of people who have been volunteers all over the time? That's what's important." And that's the spirit of volunteerism.
Completely unselfish.
And so important in terms of, if you want to find a healthy community, look and see what the level of volunteerism is.
Yeah, it's a fantastic barometer of what's really happening.
Yeah.
You spoke about the sovereign, and I remember you shared a story soon after your appointment, or perhaps it was even before it was official, that you went and grilled hot dogs and hamburgers with Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth. Will you tell me a little bit about that story?
I came to have enormous respect for the Queen, and I wish more people could know the person. I mean, they see the figure, persona, very detached on the throne, etc. A marvelous woman of great care, great faith, and very witty, and very down to earth. So I was named as Governor General in June of 2010. Queen and Prince Philip were here several weeks after that, and there was a function at the Royal York Hotel, and we went through the greeting parade. And as I shook her hand, was introduced, she said, "I look forward to seeing you very soon." Now, no one knew about that at the time, and she had a twinkle in her eye. And the custom, Rita, is that a new Governor General or Lieutenant Governor will go to Buckingham Palace, and the Queen would, over a cup of tea, present the papers. Well, we got a call in July. Would we come and spend a weekend with them in August at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, which is where they have their vacations and the place that the two of them love most. And we were honored, of course, to do that. So our protocol people had us with every stitch of formal clothing you can imagine, and we never touched it when we were there. We arrived, sat down on Friday evening for dinner, and the Queen is very organized, and she does these things herself. She said, "Now, my husband and your husband will do what men want to do. They can go shooting and so on. But my dear," she says to Sharon, who loves horses, "you and I will spend the morning in the stable and perhaps the afternoon." And big smile on Sharon's face. And then she looked down and says, "But I don't have any shoes for the stable." Prince Philip looked down and said, "Same size, I think, my dear." And the Queen goes up to her bedroom and comes back with a pair of brogues that Sharon wore for the whole weekend.
Wonderful.
And that was the Queen.
That was the Queen.
And the barbecuing story is, on the Saturday night, they took us to a shepherd's hut about 5 kilometers away in the Highlands of Scotland for a barbecue. And she drove her Land Rover with me in it, and he drove his with Sharon in it, bouncing along these roads. When we came back at the black sky, etc., there was uproarious laughter from Sharon and Prince Philip in his car, and the car was weaving a little bit, and I thought, it's going to go over the edge and go half a kilometer down. And the Queen looked at my white knuckles and said, "Don't worry, he's been over this road many times, and I think they're getting along very well." Anyway, when we got to the hut for the barbecue, Prince Philip's got out, and he goes to the barbecue, and he starts cooking the venison that he'd shot the previous weekend.
Better than hot dogs.
That's right. And I was there to help, and it was very clear he wanted no help from me. So I wandered into the kitchen. Here's the Queen setting the table. So, as my mother would instruct me, I began to help a little bit. We finished a bit. And she turned to me and she said, "You do that very well. Your mother would be very proud of you." And I thought, I hope my mother will be more proud of me of making some good decisions and not just setting the table. And long story short, at the end of it, on the Sunday as we're leaving, there had been no ceremony to present the oath of office and that sort of thing. And one of the ladies in waiting came out to the Queen and said, "Oh, you have to give this to the governor." And she said, "Oh," she says, "here are the medals," and so on. And then she said, "Oh, by the way, I do read letters, you know." And I said, "Well, Your Majesty, I will write to you regularly. And when you find them dull and boring, let me know and I'll cease and desist." So I would write to her about every 2 to 3 months.
Oh, wonderful.
Not with a diplomat's letter, but really what was going on in the pulse of the country. And she was very interested in that, especially young people. And one of the things we did for her 60th anniversary, and then we enhanced it with her passing, was the Queen Elizabeth Scholars, which provided support for Canadian college and university students going abroad for a volunteer activity or an internship or an academic exchange and bringing international students here. And that program is absolutely thriving. And she was delighted about that because it was young people from different cultures getting together and knowing one another. That was
what
the
a
Queen.
Remarkable story. What a remarkable person,
That was the Queen.
just like you.
And so gracious. I could go on with the stories, and I'll just tell one more.
Yeah.
On her 60th anniversary on the throne, we were in London at Trafalgar Square in Canada House. It's a beautiful scenery right out there in Trafalgar Square, at the center of everything. And there was a painting unveiled, and we were coming out of the house, Trafalgar House, down onto Trafalgar Square, and there was a stairs down, about 6 of them, with a red carpet. I was about half a foot behind her. And as she was going down to the second last step, there was quite a wrinkle in the rug, and I thought, my heavens, she's going to put her foot on that and she might fall. Now, the protocol is you never touch the Queen. But I could hear my mother's voice saying, "If you don't take that lady's arm, I'll never speak to you again." So I took her arm and guided her down, and all was fine. The next morning, the British tabloids were all over country bumpkin from Canada grabs the Queen by her shoulder or arm and wrestles her down to the square at Trafalgar Square. No understanding of protocol whatsoever. But, well, I guess they're right. I broke protocol, but it seemed the right thing to do. Lo and behold, about an hour later, we get a message from her private secretary, for Christopher Geit, that the Queen would like to know it's wonderful to realize that there's chivalry still exists in the United Kingdom.
Oh, that's so great.
Gracious.
Very gracious. Very, very, very gracious. Yeah. Now, I've got to get a few more stories out of you. Is it true that you were a figure or a character in Eric Siegel's book, and then which became a movie, Love Story?
Have you seen the movie?
Years and years ago. It went to come out in the 70s, right? It's a classic.
It's very syrupy.
It is syrupy.
Well, it was based on Harvard hockey. Eric Siegel was a professor of classics. He actually had rooms across the hall at Harvard. Unmarried professors often lived in a residence, and some of our classes would be there. And he was a track athlete when he was a student at Harvard and then professor. And he would tap me in the shoulder on a Sunday night and saying, "We're going to run tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock or so." And we'd run along the Charles River, so I got to know him fairly well, running for a year. But he wrote these novels based on university life, and this one called Love Story was based on the Harvard hockey team. And generally, he would take particular characters, change their names, and feature in the story. In this case, the hero was a Harvard hockey player who came from a very wealthy New England and fell in love with a Roman Catholic Italian girl from Rhode Island, and the parents wouldn't recognize the marriage because it was crossing lines, etc. So that was the theme of the story. And then the girl contracted cancer and died, and that was her. Any event, he had me. He had a character called who's the captain of the Harvard hockey team, and he gave the name Davy Johnston. They called me Davy in those days, and so it didn't change the name, and so that's how I.
That's how you're in that story.
Yeah.
That's quite something to inspire the story. Now, David, you've written you've authored or co-authored 25 books. How do you do that?
With enormous help.
Okay.
I'm not sure I do anything without enormous help, Reeta. I mean, I'm a great believer, as I said, that a feature of leadership is recognizing your total dependence on the people around you and creating an environment where they can flourish. And for me, we just published a sixth edition of the Canadian Securities Regulation book I first wrote a long time ago with student help. But it's my students that help me continue to write those things, especially the law books. We wrote 5 books while I was Governor General, like Empathy and Trust, Innovation, Idea of Canada, etc. The one we're working on now is Service and the Public Good.
That's
some of these themes.
wonderful.
But I get help from other people. In fact, my grandson is working with me on this one, but we've got a couple of writers that have worked with me over the years who have just been indispensable in making it happen. So,
That's wonderful that your grandson's doing it, because your grandkids call you Grandpa Book.
well, my daughter, Debbie, number one daughter, wrote a book with me called Cyber Law. When I was principal in McGill, I also taught in law school, and I taught securities regulation, company law. But I chaired the Information Highway Advisory Council for Mr. Chrétien's government in, what would that be, 1982, 83. We didn't have a course on information technology, how this thing was going, and intellectual property, copyright and patent, so on. So a student of mine was doing a doctorate in that, so we taught the course in that. And then my daughter took the course with my colleague giving her grades, not me, but we wrote a book called Cyber Law together. So the children did that with us. And why do you write? I'm a law professor, so I write about the law. But we wrote now the 6th book coming out of the time as Governor General, because I was so conscious of the importance of values in this country and reinforcing the best values. So this latest book, Service and the Public Good, really comes from my installation address, which was a smart and caring nation, a call to service, both the smart and the caring. And nations need their heroes and their narratives to bring out the best of them. And we have an honor system in Canada, beginning with the Order of Canada. It's old. And what's very special about it is it's totally non-political. It is totally merit-based, and it's lodged in the office of the Governor General, which is non-partisan, non-governmental, not in the office of the Prime Minister or the Minister of Cultural Heritage, etc. And it's important to celebrate our heroes, and for young people especially to know who they are and what they stood for and what they did. So in this book, we'll describe 8 or 10 of the honor systems, like the Sovereign's Medal on Voluntarism, like the Order of Canada, why they came about and what they're to recognize. And then we'll do personal vignettes on perhaps 8 or 9 people from each of the systems on what they did up to the point of being honored, and then what they did afterwards. Because in the case of the Order of Canada, the motto is they desire a better country. What do you continue to do to see that desire to have fulfillment?
Yes, people need to know their heroes, but people also love stories.
You bet.
Stories.
Yep.
And you're a marvelous storyteller. And if you think about all the people who might listen to this podcast, especially young people, there are probably stories in them too.
Yeah.
Some stories that are being written even as we speak. What would you advise them as they think about their story in life?
Well, first of all, realize that stories are a lot of fun. And number 2, you actually learn a lot from them. So I think for parents, at least at an early age, read to and read with your children and help them tell stories and express it. You know, it's a bit of a side example, Rita, but I say all the important things in life I learned from my children. Our daughter Debbie was 4 years old. We were back in England for a 6-month sabbatical leave, where we'd spent our first year of marriage in Cambridge. And we lived in a little town of Girton, which is 10 kilometers out of central Cambridge. And we lived there because we could get our daughter into school there. It was not as easy right in the center of Cambridge. And we joined the local church as well, the Anglican church, which goes back to about the year 900.
Oh
It's
my
a lot of
gosh,
history
wow,
there.
long.
And it was, I think, the 3rd Sunday we were there, and we're up in a pew in the middle. And the door opened at the back, and in came, I think, a homeless man, a man that dressed very poorly, etc., and long hair down and so on, looking pretty disheveled and with a cane, and made his way into the back row. And he'd been there at the earlier two things, so we knew he was kind of a regular, but sitting all by himself. Our daughter had paper and some crayons that she was working on. She looked back and saw him come in, and about a minute later, she picked up a couple of her papers and her crayons, and she started down to the back, and I was about to go after her, and she seemed to be okay. She goes to the back pew and sits down beside this man. I keep looking to see, is everything okay? Yeah. And after about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, she comes back up, and she doesn't have her paper anymore. And I said, Deb, you don't have your paper, which she said, no, I left it behind. Well, I said, do you want me to get it? She says, no, I gave it to that man. I drew a picture of him and me and said, I am your friend. 4 years old.
Wow.
4 years old. What got in her mind that,
It's that care.
yeah.
It's that care.
So you learn from your children.
You certainly learn from your children. David, it's been such a joy. Just such a joy. We could go on and on because there's so many stories, but it's been such a joy. Thank you.
What a joy for me.
Thank you for being on this podcast. Thank you.
I so admire what you've done in leading MasterCard.
Thank you.
Extraordinary.
Thank you. Thank you. From a small mining town in northern Ontario, grounded in humility and community values, to the highest office in Canada's public service, shaping national identity with wisdom and honor. From law professor and university president to champion of innovation, education, and volunteerism across the country. From representing Canada on the world stage to reminding us that our strength lies in being both smart and caring. David Johnston is a testament to leadership, rooted not in ego, but in service, steady, principled, and deeply human. He's the living embodiment of a legacy that transcends boundaries and calls on each of us to lead with humility, to lift others, and to leave the world better than we found it.